In 10 years, I took her from obscurity and made her a world-renowned concert pianist. Yet, just as she reached the pinnacle of her success, I chose to walk away. Everyone called me a fool. Only I knew it was time for this decade-long secret love to finally come to an end. Later, a video from the star pianist's engagement party went viral online. Chloe Armstrong, her eyes red with tears, tearing through the venue in her shredded, million-dollar couture wedding gown, desperately searching for me. When I handed in my resignation, Chloe's long, elegant fingers paused on the piano keys. She turned to me, her beautiful eyes filled with confusion. "Why?" she asked. I stood by the studio's floor-to-ceiling window, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Ms. Armstrong, I'm not getting any younger. It's time for me to settle down." After a brief pause, I added another detail. "A relative from my hometown set me up with someone recently, and it's a good match." I had fabricated a harmless lie to ensure a clean break. Chloe's fingers tapped restlessly on the keys, a nervous habit of hers. A few stray, discordant notes echoed in the studio, seeming to voice her agitation. Seeing her subtle frustration brought me a strange, bittersweet satisfaction. After a long moment, Chloe placed my resignation letter on the piano. "I can give you time off. Please, just reconsider leaving." For a second, my resolve wavered. A voice inside whispered seductively, "Stay? Just stay? You can be with her forever." But logic screamed back at me. "Ethan, she's getting engaged to Spencer Vanderbilt. Pining for a woman who belongs to someone else is wrong." My hand hovered in the air, but I ultimately let it fall without taking back the letter. Being a manager is too demanding. After I get married, I want a quieter, more stable life. I'll ensure a smooth transition for all my duties. "I'm sorry, Ms. Armstrong." With nothing more to be said, Chloe stopped arguing, her voice softening. "I understand. I wish you happiness in your marriage." By the time I left the studio, Chloe was already lost in her music again. To her, I was likely just the most competent employee she'd ever had, nothing more. That day, I sat in the break room, staring at a concert photo of her on the wall, and for the first time, I let my mind go completely blank. Usually, I was so busy I barely had time for a sip of water, juggling her performance schedule and managing every aspect of her daily life. I had to be reachable 24/7, ready to rush to her side at a moment's notice, single-handedly doing the work of an entire team. Of course, she compensated me generously, enough for me to buy my own apartment in New York City over the years. Jake had to call my name a few times before I snapped out of it. "Ethan, Ms. Armstrong needs you to head over to the club to get things ready for the party tonight." The party was a welcome-home celebration for Bella Vance, who had just returned from Juilliard, and the guest list was a who's who of Chloe's inner circle. They were the young scions of wealthy families, born with silver spoons and an air of superiority. Their circle was notoriously exclusive, but I was an exception. I was simply too good at my job to be ignored. A manager who could read the room, cater to every ego, and orchestrate a flawless event was a rare commodity. As soon as I arrived at the venue, I dove into the preparations. I managed every detail, from the vintage of the wine and the placement of the silverware to the dietary restrictions of each guest. Swap the champagne for sparkling water. Mr. Hayes is sober. Turn up the thermostat. Mr. Thompson gets cold easily. And make sure there's aged oolong tea for Ms. Chun. It's her favorite. As evening descended, the guests began to arrive. Bella Vance was the first to get there, greeting me as she walked in. "When is Chloe getting here?" I checked my watch and gave a careful reply. "She's still in rehearsal at Carnegie Hall. She should be here in about an hour." She sank into a leather sofa, looking pale and exhausted. I had a waiter lower the music and brought her a cashmere throw. "It's getting chilly tonight. Rest for a bit. It'll be a while before everyone else arrives." She took the blanket, a playful smile on her face. "You know, you should quit working for Chloe and come be my estate manager. I'll double your salary." In a world full of sycophants, my professional and respectful demeanor stood out. I laughed it off. "Well, thank you, Ms. Vance. It's good to know I have a fallback plan if I ever find myself out of a job." As the night wore on and the venue filled with light and laughter, all the guests had arrived. Chloe made her entrance in a stunning black evening gown, moving with an elegance that was both graceful and slightly aloof. I took her coat, thinking to myself that this might be the last time I would ever do this for her. After a few rounds of drinks, I found the right moment and announced my resignation to the group. Raising my glass, I spoke with sincerity. "Thank you all for your kindness over the years. I wish you all the best." A hush fell over the table, finally broken by Claire raising her glass. "Honestly, at first, we all thought you had some kind of ulterior motive with Chloe. It seems we were wrong." Everyone knew what she was implying. Several of Chloe's previous male managers had been fired for confessing their feelings for her. She eventually switched to hiring only female staff, but even then, a male assistant slipped her a love note, which became a source of amusement in their circle. Someone else chimed in playfully. I can't believe someone is actually immune to Chloe's charms. Chloe took an elegant sip of her wine and replied with a small, dismissive laugh. How ridiculous. After dinner, a small group of us gathered for drinks. At one point, Bella Vance casually asked a question. Chloe, I hear Spencer Vanderbilt is quite taken with you. My hand froze, the bottle of wine hovering over Chloe's glass. After a beat, she answered with an air of indifference. It's just a family arrangement. It doesn't matter who I marry. In their world, marriage was a transaction, a merger of interests. Love was an afterthought. It was clear she had accepted her fate, bowing to the expectations of her family. I'd met Spencer Vanderbilt. He was a rising star in the business world, young and successful, a perfect match on paper. I wished so badly that Chloe could have a different story, but reality rarely lives up to our hopes. The party went on late into the night, and by the end, all the guest drivers were waiting outside. Only Chloe's driver had been unexpectedly delayed, so the two of us stood alone at the entrance, our shadows stretching long under the streetlights. These quiet moments alone with her were the most dangerous, when all the feelings I'd suppressed threatened to erupt. But Chloe just stood there silently, the wine softening her usual cool composure. It wasn't long before her car pulled up. Chloe turned to me. Do you need a ride? I shook my head, forcing a polite smile. Thank you, Ms. Armstrong, but my fiancée is on her way to pick me up. She nodded and slipped gracefully into the car. Finally alone, I loosened my tie and leaned against a planter. For a moment, I felt completely lost. An unexpected autumn shower began to fall, the fine, cold mist clinging to my suit. I stood on the curb waiting for a ride, knowing it was nearly impossible to hail a cab in this exclusive neighborhood. Due to road construction, the driver had to take a detour. Chloe was surprised to see Ethan again. He was standing in the rain, his suit jacket draped over his arm, looking utterly dejected. She paused, struck by the sight. She had never seen her impeccably formal manager look so disheveled. At work, he was always in a perfectly pressed suit, his tie knotted just so. She'd met countless men who tried too hard to be charming, loosening their ties to show a hint of collarbone, feigning a casualness designed to impress her. But Ethan was different. His professionalism and his perfect sense of boundaries were why she had kept him by her side for so long. As they were about to pass him, her driver spoke up. Should we offer Mr. Ethan a ride? Chloe's expression was unreadable as she replied coolly. No, keep driving. She had a poor impression of this fiancé who was apparently leaving him stranded in the rain. For all his professional astuteness, Ethan seemed to have terrible judgment when it came to his personal life. But it was his life, and she had no right to interfere. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw Chloe's car drive past in the distance, but it was gone so quickly I figured I must have imagined it. It was rare to see anyone on foot in this wealthy neighborhood, and the rain was soaking through my clothes. My legs were numb by the time a taxi finally appeared. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was late, and the silence was deafening. I always told people I had the perfect life, a happy family, a loving fiancé, and a wide circle of close friends. Everyone told me how perfect my life seemed, how much they envied me. The truth was, I had nothing. No family, no lover, no friends. When I was in middle school, my father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. His condition relapsed shortly after surgery. Then, one ordinary morning, my mother left the house as usual and never came back. She took all of our savings, leaving me alone with my dying father. My father took the news with a strange calm. He continued his treatments quietly, and on the rare good days during his hospital stays, he would even cook for me. I came home from school one day to find the table laden with food. My father sat across from me, a gentle smile on his face. But a wave of unease washed over me. The food had a strange smell. Then I saw the new bottle of pesticide in the kitchen, and in that instant, I understood. I learned that even a dying man could summon incredible strength, and he held me so tightly I couldn't move. I managed to break free during one of his violent coughing fits and fled in a panic to the roof of our apartment building. My father followed me, his face streaked with tears, his arms outstretched. His voice was choked with grief. Son, this world is too cruel. I can't bear the thought of you facing it alone. Come with me. We can be together in the next life. Tears blurred my vision. I was so tired. All I wanted was to smell the familiar scent of his cigarettes one last time. Maybe it would be better this way. There was no hope left for me in this life anyway. On that windswept roof, his embrace was the only warmth I had left. He held my hand tightly as he led me slowly toward the edge. In the instant before we fell, a pair of slender but powerful hands grabbed my arm. She held on with all her might, refusing to let go no matter how much I struggled. Dangling there in the wind, all I could remember were her eyes, shining with fierce determination. I survived, but my father was gone forever. The person who saved me was Chloe Armstrong. She didn't just save my life. She gave me a reason to keep living. To repay her, I was drowning in guilt over my father, and I desperately needed something to hold on to. Chloe became my beacon of hope. When the first responders arrived, I was still clutching her hand. I looked up at her. How can I ever thank you? A 14-year-old Chloe looked down at me and said with utter seriousness, "You can come find me someday." From that night on, my life felt frozen in time. Chloe was the only thing that drove me forward. I woke up from a nightmare again tonight, the past replaying itself in my sleep. In my dreams, my father asks me why I left him behind, and the memory of my mother's cold eyes as she walked away still pierces my heart. I woke up drenched in sweat, my throat raw and my voice gone. The thermometer read 101.8. Normally, I would have popped some fever reducer and gone to work, pretending everything was fine. But this time, I decided to call in sick. I needed to rest and seriously think about where my life was going. When Chloe arrived at the studio, she learned that Ethan had called in sick. She frowned, and her already low opinion of his supposed fiancé sank even lower. Her new assistant, Leo, temporarily filling in for Ethan, brought her a cup of rose tea. Chloe took an elegant sip, her expression neutral. The tea was weaker than usual, but she said nothing, simply setting the cup down and not taking another sip. She made a mistake during her morning rehearsal, a rare occurrence. Thankfully, she knew the piece so well that she was able to recover before it became a major issue. The studio was a bit too warm, and the constant hum of the humidifier did little to soothe her dry throat. Throughout the day, she couldn't put her finger on it, but something just felt off. Something was missing. For the first time, Chloe found herself truly thinking about Ethan. She rarely paid him much direct attention because he was always so discreet, operating seamlessly in the background. He handled everything with a quiet competence that was as essential and unnoticed as the air she breathed. It was as if he wasn't there at all, yet everything was always perfect. She furrowed her brow. This was the second time today his absence had caused a disruption. She blamed Ethan's good-for-nothing fiancé for stealing her best manager away. I spent the entire day restless and anxious, unable to figure out what to do with my life. I felt like a lost moth, fluttering in the darkness with no direction. The next morning, I went back to the studio out of habit. As I walked in, Leo rushed over, his voice a nervous whisper. "Ms. Armstrong has been in a terrible mood all morning. She hasn't even touched her favorite rose tea. I saw yesterday's untouched cup on the windowsill." I took a small sniff and turned to Leo. "It has to be 6 fresh rosebuds, steeped for exactly 3 minutes in water that's precisely 175 degrees. Not a second more, not a degree less." I carefully showed him how to prepare it, and he watched my every move. Just as the fragrant steam began to fill the room, Chloe walked in. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of warmth in her eyes and the slightest hint of a pout on her lips as she looked at me. The handover process was far more complicated than I'd anticipated. I had so many responsibilities that transferring them all would take time. Besides, Chloe was notoriously meticulous, and every aspect of her life, personal and professional, required painstaking attention to detail. I ended up creating a detailed manual, covering everything from the precise temperature and humidity settings for the studio to her wardrobe preferences for performances. The delay meant I was still around for an event I had been dreading. I had to accompany Spencer Vanderbilt to the Armstrong family estate. Harboring the feelings I had for Chloe, I felt an immense sense of guilt facing her fiancé, even though I had done nothing wrong. Spencer was the picture of success in a bespoke suit, a discreet Patek Philippe on his wrist, and not a hair out of place. I greeted him with my professional smile. "Mr. Vanderbilt, Ms. Armstrong sent me to pick you up." On the drive over, Spencer asked a lot of questions about Chloe. He was understandably nervous about marrying a woman he barely knew. Sensing his unease, I tried to reassure him. "Ms. Armstrong is a very kind person, Mr. Vanderbilt. You have nothing to worry about. And please, feel free to ask me anything." He shot me a grateful look. We made small talk until we arrived at the estate. I had intended to leave as soon as I dropped him off, but the family matriarch, Mrs. Armstrong Sr., stopped me. She was a formidable figure in the music world, and even in her old age, she possessed a sharp mind and an intimidating presence. "Ethan, where is Chloe?" "Chloe wasn't here." I kept my expression neutral and chose my words carefully. There was a last-minute change to her rehearsal schedule. She may be a little late. Mrs. Armstrong scoffed and ordered me to go and get her immediately. I had seen firsthand how the matriarch could punish Chloe, forcing her to practice for 6 hours straight until her fingers bled. The faint scars were still visible on her fingertips. I called Chloe's phone as soon as I left. Thank God, she picked up on the third try. I frantically asked where she was, but she was silent for a long moment before she finally whispered my name. Ethan. Her voice was slurred, and I could hear the faint sound of a piano in the background. She was drunk. I knew instantly where she was. I raced over, and when I arrived, I found her. Chloe was leaning against the grand piano in a dimly lit bar, several empty whiskey glasses in front of her, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders. She looked up as I approached, her eyes hazy but still holding their characteristic coolness. She was drunk, but not completely gone. You're here. Give me a minute. I'm almost finished. She patted the piano bench, motioning for me to sit. Stay and talk with me for a while. The Armstrong family concert hall was a magnificent, classical-style building in the heart of the city, its lights glittering against the night sky. Chloe suddenly broke the silence. Do you think it's beautiful? My eyes were still fixed on the perfect line of her profile, and I answered without thinking. Beautiful. I immediately blushed, but thankfully, she didn't seem to notice and continued speaking, lost in her own thoughts. All this splendor is just gilded bars on a cage. A magnificent stage can't contain a free spirit. She said it with a smile, but her voice was deadly serious. Rumor had it that the Armstrong family's music empire had a dark side, built on shady dealings that they had only recently begun to move away from. Over the past 10 years, I had watched her climb to the very top of the international piano world. I was one of the few who knew about the struggles and sacrifices she had made along the way. I couldn't help but ask her, "Are you happy?" The word happy seemed to dance on her lips for a moment before she let out a small, hollow laugh, not answering the question. Instead, she looked at me. Your fiancé isn't good enough for you. I was stunned into silence. She immediately looked down. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. She drained the last of her drink, and when she stood up, she was once again the poised, elegant concert pianist the world knew. On the drive back, I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. I couldn't make sense of it, just as I had never been able to make sense of why she had been on the roof of my derelict apartment building all those years ago. But none of that mattered anymore. I was leaving. We would go our separate ways, and our paths would likely never cross again. It was raining on my last day, a hard, driving rain that seemed to echo the turmoil inside me. I sat in my office in the studio, quietly packing my things. I had spent almost a decade in this office, growing from a naive young man into a seasoned professional. I knew that every day at 3 p.m., the sun would stream through the window and illuminate the Steinway grand piano. I knew the exact spot in the corner where I could stand and hear the soft sound of Chloe's breathing as she practiced. These small, stolen moments had been my greatest comfort, but now it was time to let them go. My debt was paid. After 10 years, it was time for Spencer Vanderbilt to take over. Leo looked at me, his eyes red. I ruffled his hair and forced a smile. Don't be sad. I'm sure we'll see each other again. But deep down, I knew it was a lie. This was goodbye, forever. This city held too many painful memories for me. I needed a fresh start. As I walked out for the last time, a small part of me hoped to see her, but she was nowhere to be found. After I quit, I holed up in my apartment and slept for what felt like days, trying to catch up on a decade of lost sleep. I bought a bottle of whiskey and blasted music on my stereo. I played Chloe's music and laughed until I cried, like a man who had lost his mind. When the laughter subsided, I just sat there, staring blankly at the stacks of sheet music that filled my apartment. When I was a kid, my only wish was to survive, believing that if I just held on, my father wouldn't have jumped. After my father was gone, my wish was to work hard enough to pull my mother out of her despair. And after my mother left too, I poured everything I had into my work, dedicating my life to furthering Chloe's career. But now, I was completely adrift, with no purpose and no direction. As I was lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and was shocked to see Chloe standing outside my door. I fumbled with the lock and opened the door, suddenly conscious of my disheveled appearance. It was too late to close the door, so I forced a professional smile and invited her in, trying to appear composed. In stark contrast to my unease, Chloe was her usual elegant self. I tried calling you, she said softly. There's a last-minute change to tonight's program, and I can't find the backup files. I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd stop by. I tried to calm my racing heart and keep my expression professional. Of course, Ms. Armstrong. Please, have a seat. I'll find them for you. As I searched for the files, Chloe sat sipping the tea I'd made her, her eyes following me around the room. Her intense gaze made me nervous, and the more I rushed, the more elusive the files seemed to be. "There's no rush," Chloe said softly. Then she asked, "Don't you live with your fiancé, Ethan?" I panicked and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "She's working late tonight." After what felt like an eternity, I finally found the files and handed them to her. She took them, but her eyes remained on my face, her gaze so intense it made my heart hammer in my chest. Just as I was about to speak, a knowing smile spread across her face. "I'm getting married. I need someone reliable to plan the wedding. I was hoping you would consider helping me. Your previous salary, of course." I had never been able to say no to her. My body agreed before my brain had a chance to object. I nodded, and as I watched her walk away, 1,000 unspoken words died on my lips, leaving only a sigh. And just like that, I was back on her team, in charge of planning her wedding. Maybe seeing her get married would be the closure I needed to finally let her go. Driven by a sense of guilt towards Spencer, I threw myself into the work, determined to give Chloe the perfect wedding. But Chloe herself was strangely absent from the planning process. She was elusive and distant, communicating everything through me, as if she were a guest at her own wedding rather than the bride. It felt less like her wedding and more like an event she was contractually obligated to attend. Spencer grew more and more withdrawn. One day, during a suit fitting, he looked at me, his expression troubled. "Could you ask her if she's coming today?" It wasn't my place to call, but seeing the look on Spencer's face, I picked up the phone. I could hear the din of a crowd in the background, and Chloe's voice, when she finally answered, was weary. I was about to hang up, but the image of Spencer's hopeful face stopped me. I chose my words carefully. "The wedding dress has arrived. Would you like to come and see it?" After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice soft. "Okay, you can come and get me." I didn't understand why she wanted me to pick her up, but I did as she asked. When I arrived at the club, she was the only one left, standing alone by the window, lost in thought. I approached her quietly. "Ms. Armstrong. Ms. Armstrong." She turned suddenly, and for a moment, I saw an emotion in her eyes that I couldn't decipher, and it rooted me to the spot. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by her usual cool composure, and I wondered if I had imagined it. I helped her into the car. She was silent the entire ride, her eyes closed, as if she were trying to shut out the world. I watched her in the rearview mirror, taking the rare opportunity to study the elegant lines of her face. A fresh wave of guilt washed over me as I thought of Spencer, and I quickly looked away, silently chastising myself. Suddenly, a sense of unease washed over me. I've always trusted my gut, and my mind started racing. Something was wrong. A black SUV had been tailing us for the last half hour, maintaining a constant, unnerving distance. "Ms. Armstrong. Ms. Armstrong." I tried to wake Chloe, but she was fast asleep in the back. I had no choice but to speed up. The SUV immediately matched my speed, and we were soon racing along the winding mountain road. Their car was clearly modified. They stayed on my tail no matter how fast I went. Then, they swerved and slammed into us. The impact sent our car spinning out of control. I wrenched the wheel, narrowly avoiding sending us over the cliff's edge as the car flipped. My vision swam with red. Dazed and dizzy, I struggled to pull myself from the driver's seat. Chloe, now awake, was pinned in the back, trapped by the twisted metal of the car frame. I grabbed the tire iron from the trunk and tried to pry the door open, but the frame was too badly damaged. It wouldn't budge. Gas was leaking from the ruptured tank, and smoke began to curl from the back of the car. The danger cleared my head. All I could think about was getting Chloe out. The fire was spreading, and the car could explode at any second. Chloe looked up at me. "I don't pay you enough to die for me. Ethan, go. The car's going to explode." My nerves were already shot, and her words pushed me over the edge. "Shut up," I yelled. I finally managed to pry the door open. Chloe suddenly smiled. I didn't have time to wonder why. The fire was getting worse. Blood dripped from a gash on my arm. Gritting my teeth, I gave one last, desperate pull and finally dragged her free of the wreckage. I helped her to her feet, and we stumbled away from the burning car. We weren't far away when the car exploded, a fireball that lit up the night sky. I was never more grateful for all the hours I'd spent at the gym. Without that strength, we both would have died. As the sound of sirens grew closer, a wave of exhaustion hit me. And then, everything went black. Chloe regained consciousness first. She remembered the moment of impact, remembered Ethan wrenching the wheel, taking the brunt of the collision himself. She sat by his hospital bed, looking at him as if she were seeing him for the first time. Chloe had known too much betrayal in her life. During a childhood kidnapping, her own father had abandoned her to save himself. Her desperate cries had been answered by the sound of a heavy iron door slamming shut. Her mother, who had promised to always be there for her, had ended her own life with a piano wire. So many people had come and gone from her life, all of them leaving in the end. She had grown used to being alone. And yet this man, who had every reason to run, had stayed. She prided herself on her ability to read people, but she couldn't figure him out. What did he really want? She wondered. I woke up feeling like I was surfacing from a deep fog, and the first thing I saw was Chloe, staring at me intently. My chest tightened. Had she figured it out? Her gaze was piercing, and as our eyes met, my palms began to sweat. Why did you save me? My mind raced, and I quickly came up with an answer, delivering it with a smile. Ms. Armstrong, I'm a gambling man, and the opportunity to have a world-famous concert pianist owe you her life? That's a bet worth making. Chloe frowned, her eyes searching my face, as if trying to gauge the truth of my words. What do you want? In her world, the people who claimed to want nothing were the most dangerous. A clear price tag was something she could understand and trust. I thought for a moment, trying to come up with something that would seem like a fair trade for my life, something that would put her at ease. I want the exclusive rights to manage your next album. The commission from that alone would be enough to set me up for life. I saw her shoulders relax, and I knew I had said the right thing. She gave a small laugh. An album is so uncertain. How about a music shop in the city center instead? Mr. Ethan, I smiled back. A multi-million-dollar music shop? I accept your generous offer, Ms. Armstrong. With the debt settled, Chloe no longer had any reason to feel indebted to me. She stood up to leave. Then get some rest, Ethan. You don't need to worry about the engagement anymore. I spent a week in the hospital. The day I was discharged was the day of Chloe's engagement party. The media was in a frenzy, covering every detail of the lavish affair that united the Armstrong and Vanderbilt dynasties. The grand concert hall where the party was held was transformed into a fairy tale wonderland, glittering under crystal chandeliers. This should have been the end of the story, the final chapter. But I couldn't shake the feeling of sadness that clung to me. I wandered the streets aimlessly until I found myself in a quiet little bar. For years, I had been the responsible one, the one who cleaned up the messes. I rarely allowed myself to let go. I ordered a whiskey. The burn as it went down made me wince. They say you drink to forget, but the bitter taste only brought back a flood of painful memories, and tears streamed down my face, falling into my glass. As the world began to blur, I managed to pull out my phone and call a car service, making sure to tell the driver to get me home safely. At her engagement party, Chloe received an unexpected call. It was the car service I had called. It was the perfect excuse to escape the suffocating charade of the party. When she arrived at the bar, the driver rushed up to her. Ma'am, the gentleman is very intoxicated. He couldn't tell me his address, so I called the most recent number in his call history. He looked at Chloe nervously. You're not his boss, are you? I hope I don't get in trouble for this. Chloe took me from him, her voice calm and reassuring. Don't worry, I'll take it from here. She helped me out of the bar. I was acting like a child, one moment stroking her cheek, the next, playfully messing up her hair. Chloe had never seen me so unguarded. She decided to press her advantage. Why did you stay with me for so long? I mumbled, a goofy, drunken smile on my face. To repay a debt. What debt? You saved my life. And how did you plan to repay me? Chloe pressed, by giving her everything she ever wanted. And why would you do that? Because I love her. Chloe had taken psychology courses at Juilliard. She knew how to draw the truth out of someone. She had been searching for an explanation, but she had not expected this. He loved her. Ethan loved her. Chloe studied my drunken face, my smile open and guileless. There was no deceit in my eyes. Countless men had professed their love for her over the years. She had seen every kind of affection, from fiery passion to quiet devotion. But she had never encountered a love like this, a love that had been kept a secret for a decade, hidden from the world. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why there was no fiancé, why his apartment had no trace of a woman's touch. Chloe was lost in thought. Could she trust this love? A love so pure and selfless that he would risk his life for her, without a second thought. I woke up the next day with a pounding headache and the vague memory of a strange dream. The only thing I could remember clearly was Chloe's eyes, shining like stars. Why was I dreaming about her again? It was wrong to be having these kinds of thoughts about another man's fiancée. For a long time after that, I avoided all entertainment news. I took a train and traveled across the country, stopping in cities where no one knew my name. I visited single-parent families in need, offering them what little help I could. I often wondered if things would have been different for my mother if someone had offered her a helping hand. There was so much suffering in the world. All I could do was help the people I could. Then one day, a shocking headline caught my eye. piano virtuoso Chloe Armstrong announces retirement. The article featured a photo of her and Spencer, torn in half, with a bold headline. High society engagement broken. Why is the piano goddess stepping away from the spotlight? I immediately called Spencer, my heart pounding. Ethan, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. It was a business decision. Our personal feelings were not a factor. There was nothing I could do. After I calmed down and thought about it, I began to see the truth. This was Chloe's escape plan. She had always appeared so poised and perfect, but I knew how weary she was of the constant pressure, how suffocated she felt by the gilded cage of her fame. I had tried to talk to her about it before, but she had always brushed off my concerns. She had been planning her escape all along. I thought back to the night I'd found her drunk in the bar, so vulnerable and lost. Her glamorous life was nothing more than a beautiful prison. And now, she needed someone to be her rock, just as she had been for me all those years ago on that rooftop. She needed someone to give her strength, to be her anchor in the storm. The thought had barely formed in my mind before I was on my way to her studio. The once vibrant studio was now dark and silent. She had used the last of her savings to give her staff a generous severance package. I walked down the silent hallway and pushed open the door to the main studio. Chloe was sitting at the piano, shrouded in shadows. The wind billowed the curtains, creating a mournful melody. She looked up at me, her eyes dark and unreadable, holding a universe of unspoken thoughts. I slowly reached out and took her hand in mine. The words I had practiced 1,000 times in my head vanished the moment our skin touched. In that moment, all I wanted was to hold her hand, to give her the same strength and comfort she had once given me. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, a brilliant pianist crushed by the rigid rules of high society. Her mother had become a tragic footnote in the music world. The industry had tried to mold her, a true artist, into a commercial product, forcing her to play a part, to compromise her integrity for profit. Everyone around her had pushed her closer and closer to the edge. They said she didn't have the business sense to justify her position. But what if the rules themselves were the problem? The Armstrong family was still involved in illegal copyright dealings. Her mother had discovered the truth and had tried to expose them, but she had been silenced, destroyed by their lies. Chloe had planned to face the fallout alone, to let the darkness die with her career. But then Ethan had appeared. Was it because of love? She had seen him the moment he walked in. While everyone else was packing up to leave, he had walked against the tide, making his way toward her through the scattered sheet music. He was like a knight in a fairy tale, coming to rescue his princess. The thought made her smile. How could anyone be so foolishly romantic? He had walked right up to her and taken her hand, and a warmth had spread from his palm through her entire body. It was only then that she realized how cold her own hands were. She squeezed his hand back. In the midst of the storm, his warmth was the only thing that felt real. I stayed with Chloe as she dealt with the closure of her studio. During one press conference, angry fans threw eggs at her. The Armstrong family had hidden too many secrets for too long, and the public needed someone to blame. This was the price she had to pay. The day Chloe announced her retirement, her grandfather had a stroke and was hospitalized. That night, she asked me to have a drink with her. When I arrived, I realized it was her private studio. I hesitated at the doorway. I'm not sure this is a good idea. We weren't exactly friends, and the intimacy of the situation made me uneasy. Chloe's eyes were downcast, and she looked utterly defeated. There was a catch in her voice when she spoke. Had she been crying? He was her family, after all. My heart ached for her. I took the bottle from her, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. What was the harm in having one drink with her? I was good at exercising restraint. I had never seen Chloe like this before. Her black dress was rumpled, her hair was a mess, and she looked so fragile, as if she might just disappear into the night. She was always so composed, so elegant, the center of attention wherever she went. But now, she looked like a fallen angel. In her drunken state, she kept murmuring my name, demanding that I answer her. Her voice was thick with alcohol, and the sound of her saying my name sent my heart racing. She suddenly leaned in close, so close I could feel her breath on my skin. The moonlight caught her long eyelashes, casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. Ethan, will you always be with me? I didn't answer right away. Life is long and unpredictable. Who can promise forever? Besides, I was just her manager. But she was insistent, like a stubborn child demanding a promise. Yes, I whispered. I'll always be here. The promise seemed to soothe her. She grew quiet, her brow furrowed in thought as she studied my face. Suddenly, she complained of being hot and pushed her hair away from her neck, exposing the pale, delicate skin. The gesture was unconsciously seductive. I had never thought of Chloe in that way before. I was momentarily stunned, and quickly averted my gaze. But she kept leaning closer, and I could feel my face flush. It was a cold winter night, but suddenly the room felt unbearably hot. I forced myself to create some distance between us. She gave me a quizzical look before she started drinking again, not stopping until she passed out. Just before she lost consciousness, she looked at me, and I could have sworn I saw a hint of encouragement in her eyes. Encouragement for what? I took her home and put her to bed, but I lay awake all night, trying to make sense of that look. She called the next day to thank me for taking care of her. "It was my pleasure, Ms. Armstrong," I said, my voice cheerful. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she said, her voice tight with frustration, "Ethan, you are so..." She hung up before she could finish the sentence, leaving me completely bewildered. With the studio gone, there was no reason for us to see each other anymore. I didn't see her for several days. Then, one night, she showed up at my door, drunk again. The moment I opened the door, she collapsed into my arms. I managed to get her to the sofa, but as I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist, pulling me off balance and sending me tumbling down on top of her. We were inches apart. She looked deep into my eyes and whispered my name. Ethan. It was just my name, but the way she said it, so softly, made my heart skip a beat. I could see my own reflection in her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Our breaths mingled in the small space between us, and I found myself leaning closer until our lips met. In that moment, all my years of restraint, all my carefully constructed walls, crumbled into dust. At dawn, I fled like a coward. I was halfway down the block before I remembered it was my own apartment. I wandered the neighborhood until dusk, then crept back to my door and turned the knob as quietly as I could. The lights flicked on, and there was Chloe, sitting on my sofa, an eyebrow arched in amusement. "Planning on a love M and leave M, are we?" I froze in the doorway, trapped. "Come here," she said. "We need to talk." I opened my mouth to explain, to apologize, to say it was a mistake, but she held up a hand to stop me. "You've never been good with words. Let me talk." Her expression was more serious than I had ever seen it, and my heart lodged itself in my throat. "Ethan, you've always put me on a pedestal, but I'm just a person. I have feelings, I have desires. I fall in love, I get jealous." I started to protest, but her next words stopped me cold. "I know you're probably not thinking clearly right now, and it's unfair of me to put you on the spot, but I'm also afraid that if I give you too much time to think, you'll see the real me, and you won't love me anymore. I don't care if it's gratitude or admiration or something else entirely. You've made me feel something, and I'm not letting you go that easily." She pulled a diamond ring from her pocket, and her eyes sparkled as brightly as the stone. "Ethan, will you take a chance on me? Will you marry me?" My mind went blank. I nodded, and she slipped the ring onto my finger. "Do you have your ID with you?" I nodded numbly. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. "Then let's go." "Go where?" "To get married. To get our marriage license." As the sun began to set, we walked out of the city hall, marriage license in hand, the last couple to be married that day. The sunset painted the sky in fiery shades of orange and red, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally home.